A Soviet air defense advisor trusts the mathematical certainty of his radar screens. Deep beneath Baghdad on January 17, 1991, the integrated shield he helped build reports absolute calm. The silence is a lie, and the physics he believed in is about to be proven wrong in the most violent way imaginable. Colonel Mikhail Surov of the Soviet PVO, the Air Defense Forces, is a man who understands systems. He sees the world not as a place of chaos, but as a series of interlocking machines. For every action, there is a predictable reaction. For every threat, there is a calculated countermeasure. His faith is grounded in concrete, steel, and the elegant logic of layered defense. The bunker he now sits in, buried dozens of feet beneath the Iraqi capital, is the physical embodiment of this faith. It is a fortress of engineering designed to withstand pressures that could turn the city above into glass. Inside, the air is cool and still, tasting of stale cigarette smoke and ozone from the humming electronics. Dim emergency lights cast long shadows across the consoles, illuminating the faces of the Iraqi officers with a soft green glow from their screens. Surov is here as an advisor, a steady hand sent from Moscow to ensure that one of the most sophisticated air defense networks outside the Warsaw Pact performs as designed. He helped build this shield, weaving together Soviet missiles, French computers, and a web of radars into a single, formidable weapon. He trusts it because he trusts the principles it is built upon: redundancy, overlapping fields of fire, and the simple truth that nothing can move through the sky without leaving a trace. Tonight, that truth feels absolute. The atmosphere in the bunker is calm, almost mundane. It is the quiet confidence of men who believe they hold an unbreakable shield. They have prepared for this moment for months, anticipating the inevitable clash with American air power. They expect a storm of electronic jamming, a sky filled with noise and phantoms as enemy aircraft try to force their way through. They are ready for the chaos, but the chaos has not come. Instead, there is only a profound, almost unnerving silence. The system protecting Baghdad is a fortress of overlapping signals. It begins dozens of miles away with long-range Soviet-made P-18 radars nicknamed Spoon Rest by NATO. These are the network's early warning eyes designed to detect approaching aircraft long before they become a threat. Any signal from these outer sentinels is passed to a series of sophisticated French-made acquisition radars, which lock onto individual targets and calculate their speed, altitude, and trajectory. This information then flows into the Kari command system, a centralized brain that assigns each target to the best available weapon. The weapons themselves form another layer of defense. For high-altitude threats, there are the powerful SA-2 and SA-3 missiles, Soviet classics that have guarded the skies for decades. Closer in for lower and faster targets are the more agile SA-6 missile batteries. And beneath this missile umbrella, hundreds of anti-aircraft guns form the final, brutal line of defense, ready to fill the air with a wall of steel. Each layer is designed to back up the next. If a plane evades the long-range radars, the French systems will find it. If a missile misses, another will be launched. Colonel Surov has reviewed the schematics 100 times. He knows its strengths and its theoretical weaknesses, but the core principle is sound. An attacker cannot simply bypass it. They must fight their way through, and fighting creates a signature. It leaves evidence on the radar screens, bursts of jamming, electronic clutter, and the unmistakable blips of incoming aircraft. On this night, however, the scopes are clean. The sky above Baghdad is, according to every instrument in this bunker, completely empty. The system reports only peace. At 2:51 a.m., the illusion shatters. A deep, resonant thump travels through the concrete floor, more felt than heard. It is a vibration that speaks of immense energy being released somewhere nearby. The lights flicker for a heartbeat. On a central status board, a single light turns from green to red. It is the Al-Taji sector, a major air defense operations center to the north, one of the key nodes in the entire network. It has been hit. In an instant, it is gone. The Iraqi officers shout, their voices sharp with confusion. They stare at their screens, their faces illuminated by the serene green glow of a sky with nothing in it. A senior officer turns to Surov, his expression a mixture of panic and disbelief. There was no warning, no alert. The Al-Taji center never reported an attack, never fired a missile, never even saw a target. It simply ceased to exist. Surov, his own composure cracking, orders them to recheck everything. It has to be a malfunction, a technical error. Then another vibration rolls through the bunker, heavier this time. Another red light flashes on the board, the national power grid hub. Moments later, another impact strikes a primary telecommunications center. The city's nervous system is being severed piece by piece. The bunker's main lights die, plunging the room into darkness for a terrifying half-second before the dim, reddish emergency lamps kick in, casting everyone in a hellish glow. An Iraqi officer cries out, his voice thin with fear. "There is nothing on the screen, nothing!" Surov moves from console to console, his mind racing through possibilities. He is an expert in electronic warfare. He knows what jamming looks like. Jamming is noise. It is a brute force assault on the electromagnetic spectrum. A digital scream designed to overwhelm and confuse radar operators. It fills a screen with static, with false targets, with chaos. It is an undeniable presence. But this is the opposite. It is an absence. A perfect, clean, and total void. The radar screens are not screaming. They are whispering that the sky is empty. It is a physical impossibility. A city is being systematically dismantled from above, and the most heavily defended airspace on the planet sees nothing at all. The shield has not been broken. It has been bypassed as if it were never there. As the sun rises over a shattered Baghdad, the first reports of the impossible night begin their journey north. What started as a localized military disaster is about to become a strategic crisis, shaking the foundations of a superpower that believed its defenses were absolute. The information arrives not as a single, coherent narrative, but as a fragmented series of shocks. Encrypted telex messages clatter to life in the communications hubs of the Soviet General Staff, spitting out lines of terse, technical language. The initial reports are confusing, almost nonsensical. They speak of catastrophic damage to key Iraqi command nodes, yet the corresponding radar logs show nothing. There are no traces of enemy aircraft, no evidence of jamming, no hint of the massive air attack that must have occurred. For the marshals and generals in Moscow, this is more than just the failure of an allied nation's military. The Qari air defense network in Iraq was not merely an export product, it was a direct descendant of their own national shield. Its architecture, its logic, and many of its key components were scaled-down versions of the very systems protecting Moscow, Leningrad, and the vast network of Soviet strategic missile sites. The Soviet Union had built its entire military doctrine around the certainty of its radar umbrella. It was a layered, brutalist approach to defense, a wall of signals and missiles so dense that no conventional force could breach it without being detected and annihilated. The reports from Baghdad suggest that this wall is made of glass. If the Iraqi network, a robust and modern system, could be rendered completely blind, then the horrifying implication is that Moscow could be blinded too. The silence on those radar screens in the Baghdad bunker echoes through the halls of the Ministry of Defense, becoming a roar of existential dread. The panic is not loud or chaotic. It is a cold, professional fear that settles over the leadership. An enemy has demonstrated an ability to move through their defenses as if they were ghosts. The shield is an illusion. Within days, an emergency commission is formed. The PVO summons its finest minds, the country's leading radar theorists, specialists in electronic warfare, and the most experienced aerospace engineers. They gather in a windowless conference room at the PVO headquarters, a sterile environment where the only decorations are maps of Soviet airspace. Piles of documents cover the long table. The radar logs from Baghdad, printed on thin, continuous feed paper, showing hours of an empty, peaceful sky. Alongside them are satellite photographs provided by military intelligence. These images, captured in the stark light of morning, show the devastatingly precise results of the attack. Craters centered perfectly on hardened bunkers, communications towers cut cleanly at their base, and air defense command centers reduced to rubble. The Commission is now faced with two sets of perfect, undeniable data. Both are forensically correct. The radar tapes are clean, showing no signs of tampering or malfunction. The satellite photos are equally clear, showing surgical destruction that could only have been delivered from the air. The problem is that these two realities cannot exist in the same universe. One set of data claims an empty sky, the other proves a devastatingly effective attack occurred within that same sky. An analyst, his voice low with a mixture of awe and terror, looks over the conflicting evidence. He sees the impossibility laid out before him in black and white, in radar logs and satellite prints. He speaks the thought that is in everyone's mind. This cannot happen. Something here violates the known principles of physics. The very laws of cause and effect, the foundations of the science that built their entire defense network, seem to have been broken over Baghdad. The Commission's work becomes a desperate search for an explanation, any explanation that can reconcile the two realities. The first theories are the most conventional. Perhaps the French, who had supplied the network's central computers, had built in a secret backdoor, a kill switch they provided to the Americans. It's a plausible theory born of Cold War paranoia, but it doesn't explain why the Soviet-made radars also saw nothing. Another theory centers on Iraqi incompetence. Maybe the operators were poorly trained, panicked, or failed to follow protocol. This idea is comforting but quickly dismissed. The presence of Soviet advisors like Colonel Surov on the ground confirms the system was operating correctly. The Iraqis were prepared and vigilant. The failure was not human, it was technological. The investigation then turns to a new, unknown form of American electronic warfare. Perhaps the US had developed a jamming system so advanced that it didn't just create noise, but instead projected a signal of a perfectly empty sky, fooling the computers into reporting calm. This is a more sophisticated idea, but it still doesn't quite fit. Such a system would require an impossibly complex understanding of the Iraqi network and would likely leave some faint, residual trace. The logs, however, are pristine. As the conventional theories crumble, more exotic and unsettling ideas emerge from the fringes of theoretical science. On chalkboards filled with complex equations, engineers begin to sketch out concepts that feel like science fiction. One theory is plasma stealth, the idea of surrounding an aircraft in a cloud of ionized gas. This plasma field could, in theory, absorb incoming radar waves, rendering the aircraft invisible. Another, even more complex idea is active cancellation. This involves an aircraft detecting an incoming radar signal and instantly transmitting back a perfect, inverted copy of that signal. An anti-wave that would meet the original and cancel it out, erasing the aircraft's reflection from existence. Each of these theories is seductive, offering a glimpse into a new era of physics. But each is also deeply flawed, requiring staggering amounts of energy and computational power far beyond what is believed to be possible. More importantly, none of them fully explains the absolute perfect silence reported from Baghdad. The mystery remains, and for the leadership of the PVO, it is a mystery that points to a terrifying vulnerability at the heart of their nation. But beneath the surface, subtle changes are already shaping the next steps. The impossible events in Baghdad did not create a new fear in Moscow. They gave a name and a terrifying urgency to a ghost that was already haunting the edges of the Soviet Empire. For years, strange and unsettling reports have been trickling in from the vast, lonely frontiers of Soviet airspace, dismissed as anomalies, but slowly weaving together into a pattern of profound unease. The Soviet air defense network was the largest integrated machine on Earth, a sprawling web of radar stations, interceptor bases, and missile sites stretching from the frozen tundra of Siberia to the warm waters of the Barents Sea. It was a system designed for a massive continental war manned by thousands of operators who spent their days and nights watching the sky. And for years, some of them had been seeing things that shouldn't exist. Pilots on patrol over the desolate Arctic wastes would report fleeting blips on their radar, objects that appeared for a moment with impossible speed and then vanished without a trace. Radar operators stationed in the Far East, staring at screens filled with the normal atmospheric clutter of a living sky, would sometimes describe seeing holes in the data. It was as if a small patch of the sky, with all its background noise and faint energy, had been momentarily erased. They described it as watching a black spot, a moving void, glide silently across their scope before the normal static of the universe rushed back in to fill the space. These were phantom signals, ghosts in the machine that defied easy explanation. The operators who reported them were often seasoned veterans, men who understood the difference between a flock of birds, a weather anomaly, and something truly unknown. They filed their reports dutifully, describing what they saw in precise technical language. But these reports traveled up the chain of command and met a wall of institutional skepticism. For the most part, the strange sightings were dismissed. The official explanations were always mundane: equipment faults, severe weather phenomena like temperature inversions, or even solar flares disrupting the sensitive electronics. In a system so vast, a certain number of errors and false positives were statistically inevitable. It was easier for the high command in Moscow to attribute these events to known variables than to confront the possibility that something was fundamentally wrong with their understanding of the sky. But for the men on the front lines, the fear was more immediate. They were the sentinels standing on the wall, and they could feel something probing the edges of their defenses, testing them in ways they could not comprehend. The incidents were too consistent, too widespread to be mere coincidence. The pattern was undeniable. Something new was flying in the shadows of Soviet airspace, and no one could track it, target it, or even properly see it. This created a quiet, creeping dread, a sense of vulnerability that gnawed at the edges of their professional confidence. The events in Baghdad poured fuel on this slow-burning fire. Suddenly, the dismissed reports from the Arctic and Siberia no longer seemed like random malfunctions. They felt like rehearsals. The moving voids described by radar operators now sounded terrifyingly similar to the absolute silence that had descended over the Iraqi network. The phantom blips seen by pilots felt like glimpses of the very weapon that had just dismembered a modern air defense system with impunity. The fear that had been a quiet whisper on the fringes of the PVO now became a roar in its heart. Within the closed, insular world of the Soviet air defense forces, a legend began to take shape. It was born in the hushed conversations in isolated radar posts and in the barracks of interceptor pilots. They needed a name for the ghost they were hunting, a way to speak about the unspeakable. The name that emerged was Nevidimka, the Invisible One. The Nevidimka was a myth, a piece of folklore woven from a handful of strange radar returns, fleeting visual contact, and a deep-seated fear of American technological prowess. Stylized sketches of a phantom aircraft born from rumor and imagination began to appear, passed from hand to hand. These drawings showed a machine unlike any other, with sharp, unnatural angles and a dark, non-reflective skin. It was a bogeyman for the electronic age, a symbol of an enemy who had seemingly mastered the laws of physics and could move through their world unseen. The legend of the Nevidimka became a way for the soldiers and officers of the PVO to process a reality that their training and their technology told them was impossible. It was an admission that their shield, the great pride of the Soviet military, had a hole in it, a hole they could not see and could not fix. The High Command continued to officially dismiss the reports, filing them away in classified folders, but they could not stop the whispers. The myth of the Invisible One had taken root, a testament to the fact that sometimes the absence of evidence is the most terrifying evidence of all. But while the men of the PVO were chasing a ghost born of fear, the truth was far stranger and more elegant than any myth. The secret to the Nevidimka was not a new law of physics or some exotic, undiscovered technology. The secret was mathematics, and ironically, the key to unlocking that secret had been published in plain sight, written by one of their own, years before anyone understood its devastating power. As the Soviet Emergency Commission chased theories of plasma fields and active cancellation, the answer to their impossible problem was sitting on a dusty shelf in a Moscow technical library. It was not hidden behind layers of state secrecy or contained within a captured piece of American hardware. It was printed on the pages of a dense, almost unreadable monograph published openly nearly 3 decades earlier. The story begins in 1962 with a brilliant but obscure Soviet physicist named Pyotr Ufimtsev. Working at the Moscow Institute of Radio Engineering and Electronics, Ufimtsev was fascinated by a niche problem in theoretical physics: how electromagnetic waves, specifically radar waves, scatter when they strike an object. For decades, the prevailing scientific wisdom was that an object's radar reflection was proportional to its size. A bigger object created a bigger reflection. It was a simple, intuitive rule that formed the basis of all radar technology. But Ufimtsev's work challenged this assumption. Using complex physical optics equations, he developed a revolutionary theory. He argued that the strength of a radar return was not determined by an object's overall size or surface area, but primarily by the arrangement of its edges. The reflection, he calculated, was generated at the boundaries, the sharp lines, points, and discontinuities of a shape. The smooth, flat surfaces in between contributed almost nothing to the radar echo that returned to the receiver. He compiled his findings into a dense monograph titled Method of Edge Waves in the Physical Theory of Diffraction. It was a masterpiece of theoretical physics, filled with page after page of elegant but punishingly complex mathematics. When he presented his work to Soviet military officials, they were intrigued but ultimately unimpressed. They saw no practical military application for his theories. Their goal was to build bigger, more powerful radars to detect enemy bombers at greater distances. Ufimtsev's paper seemed like a purely academic exercise, a mathematical curiosity with no relevance to the battlefield. Concluding it had no strategic value, the state allowed the paper to be published openly, translated and distributed to libraries and universities around the world. It was a decision they would come to regret. A decade later, thousands of miles away, the paper found its way into the hands of an engineer at Lockheed's highly secretive Advanced Development Projects Unit, better known as the Skunk Works. Hidden away in the desolate heat of the Nevada desert, the engineers at Skunk Works were tasked with designing the impossible. At the time, they were working on a critical challenge from the US Air Force to create an aircraft that would be effectively invisible to Soviet radar. They had already made progress with planes like the SR-71 Blackbird, which used radar-absorbent materials and sleek, curved shapes to reduce its signature. But these methods only minimized the reflection. They didn't eliminate it. The Skunk Works team was stuck, hitting a wall in conventional design. Then an engineer named Denis Overholser discovered Ufimtsev's forgotten paper. While the Soviet bureaucracy had seen only abstract theory, the Lockheed engineers saw a blueprint. Ufimtsev's equations were a key, a mathematical recipe for invisibility. If radar waves reflected primarily off edges, then the path to stealth was not to create a smooth, rounded shape, but to do the exact opposite. Using Ufimtsev's formulas, they could design a shape made entirely of flat triangular facets, angled precisely so that they would scatter nearly all incoming radar waves away from the receiver like a shattered mirror deflecting light in 1,000 different directions. Instead of returning an echo, the aircraft would make the radar waves vanish into the surrounding sky. Working in secret with early computer modeling programs, the engineers began to design this impossible shape. The result was something that looked utterly alien. It was not a plane, it was a jagged black crystal, a collection of flat panels that seemed to defy every known principle of aerodynamics. It had no curved surfaces, no smooth lines, nothing that resembled a conventional aircraft. Its bizarre appearance earned it the nickname, the Hopeless Diamond. It was a masterpiece of electromagnetic theory, a physical manifestation of Ufimtsev's mathematics. On a radar screen, it was predicted to have the signature of a small bird, not a fighter jet. There was only one problem: it was aerodynamically unstable. Any object that complex and jagged should not be able to fly. A conventional pilot using traditional controls would be unable to keep it in the air for more than a few seconds before it would tumble uncontrollably and fall from the sky. The very facets that made it invisible to radar also made it an aerodynamic nightmare. The Skunk Works team had solved the problem of stealth, but in doing so they had created a plane that couldn't fly. The Hopeless Diamond was a brilliant failure, a paradox sitting on the drawing board. It seemed the laws of physics would not allow a single object to be both a ghost and an airplane at the same time. The project was at a dead end until another, unrelated technological revolution provided the missing piece of the puzzle. But beneath the surface, subtle changes are already shaping the next steps. The paradox of the Hopeless Diamond, a shape that was invisible but unflyable, seemed destined to remain a theoretical curiosity. The laws of aerodynamics and the laws of electromagnetism appeared to be in direct conflict. Yet the solution was already emerging from an entirely different field of engineering, one that would fundamentally change the relationship between pilot and machine. The breakthrough was digital flight control, better known as fly-by-wire. In a conventional aircraft, a pilot's controls are physically linked to the plane's control surfaces through a series of cables and hydraulic systems. The pilot feels the plane's response directly, but fly-by-wire severed this physical connection. Instead, the pilot's inputs were fed into a powerful onboard computer, which then translated those commands into instructions for the aircraft's flaps, rudders, and elevators. The computer acted as an intelligent intermediary, a digital brain that could make thousands of micro-adjustments every second, far faster than any human could react. Originally developed to improve the stability and performance of conventional fighter jets, the engineers at Skunk Works realized that fly-by-wire could do something far more radical. It could make an unstable aircraft fly. The computer didn't care that the Hopeless Diamond was inherently unbalanced. It could be programmed to constantly correct for the shape's aerodynamic flaws, making continuous tiny adjustments to keep it flying straight and level. A plane that should tumble from the sky could now be tamed by software. The pilot would no longer be flying the aircraft directly. They would be telling a computer where they wanted to go, and the computer would handle the impossible physics of keeping it airborne. With this final piece of the puzzle in place, the project moved from theory to reality. The F-117 Nighthawk was born. It was less an aircraft and more a flying equation, a physical manifestation of Ufimtsev's mathematics brought to life by computational power. Its entire design was a slave to the goal of radar invisibility. The flat, faceted surfaces were coated in a top-secret radar-absorbent material, RAM, a black, iron-rich paint that could soak up electromagnetic energy like a sponge. Every detail was meticulously engineered to minimize its signature. The engine intakes were covered with fine grills to hide the highly reflective fan blades from incoming radar. The jet exhausts were flattened into wide, narrow slits to cool the hot gases rapidly, reducing the plane's infrared signature and making it harder for heat-seeking missiles to lock on. Even the cockpit canopy was coated with a thin, transparent layer of gold to deflect radar waves. The aircraft carried no radar of its own. To emit any signal was to announce its presence, a mistake that would be instantly fatal. It was designed to be a passive, silent hunter, a ghost that moved through the enemy's world without making a sound. The F-117 was a scalpel, not a hammer. It was not a dogfighter. It was slow, subsonic, and lacked the agility of a traditional fighter. It carried only 2 bombs, precision-guided munitions designed to strike the most critical and heavily defended targets, command bunkers, communications hubs, and the brains of an enemy's air defense network. Its purpose was not to win a battle, but to blind the enemy before the battle even began, ensuring that the main force of conventional aircraft could operate with impunity. For nearly a decade, the F-117 lived in the shadows, its existence one of the most closely guarded secrets of the Cold War. The first operational squadron was based at a remote, isolated airfield in the Nevada desert, hidden from the prying eyes of Soviet satellites. The pilots and ground crews lived double lives, their true work hidden even from their families. They flew exclusively at night, their black, alien-shaped aircraft blending into the darkness of the desert sky. Training was intense and unforgiving. Flying the Nighthawk was notoriously difficult, even with the help of its computers. Pilots described it as flying a rock, a fundamentally unstable machine that was always a fraction of a second away from disaster. During this decade of secrecy, the F-117 was used in a handful of covert operations, its performance validating the radical theories that had created it. It was a weapon from the future operating in the present. While the Soviet Union was building more missiles and more powerful radars, perfecting its wall of defense, the United States had quietly built a key that could walk right through it. The Nighthawk was not an evolutionary step in military aviation. It was a revolutionary leap, a new kind of weapon that changed the rules of warfare. And its public debut on a January night over Baghdad would be the moment the world finally saw the ghost that had been haunting the shadows for years. Word count 973. At the same time, pressures continue to build. As the final hours of diplomacy faded on the evening of January 16, 1991, the machinery of war began to turn. Deep in the Saudi Arabian desert, the pilots of the 37th Tactical Fighter Wing made their final preparations. They were a quiet, professional community, set apart from the rest of the massive coalition air fleet. Their mission was not to join the main aerial armada, but to precede it, to slip through the darkness and surgically remove the eyes and ears of the Iraqi military before it even knew it was under attack. On January 17th, as the moonless night settled over the Persian Gulf, the first wave of 10 F-117 Nighthawks lifted off from their airbase. They flew north, their black faceted shapes melting into the darkness. Unlike the waves of conventional aircraft that would follow, they did not fly in tight formations or rely on electronic jamming support. They flew alone, separated by miles of empty sky, each aircraft a solitary hunter on a precise, pre-programmed path. Their routes were audacious, taking them directly into the heart of what was considered one of the most formidable air defense networks on Earth. They crossed into Iraqi airspace completely unseen. On the radar screens in the bunkers below, nothing changed. The sky remained empty. The Nighthawks flew directly over the early warning radars past the missile engagement zones and deep into the command and control rings surrounding Baghdad. They were ghosts moving with impunity through a fortress of signals, their existence a physical impossibility to the very systems designed to detect them. Their targets were the critical nodes of the Iraqi war machine, the air defense operations centers, key communication hubs, hardened command bunkers, and vital intelligence headquarters. The results of that first night were staggering and decisive. Flying in two waves, the F-117s struck 31% of Iraq's most strategic, high-value targets within the first 24 hours of the war. Not a single F-117 was lost or even detected by enemy radar. In total, the 42 Nighthawks in the theater represented just 2.5% of the coalition's tactical air assets, yet they were assigned to over a third of the most heavily defended targets on day one. They were the tip of the spear, the scalpel that dissected the Iraqi nervous system, leaving the rest of the military paralyzed and blind. The attack on the Al-Taji Air Defense Center, the first impact felt by Colonel Surov in his bunker, was a perfect example of their effectiveness. The center was housed in a hardened concrete bunker, protected by its own missile batteries. The Nighthawk pilot approached undetected, released a single 2,000-pound laser-guided bomb, and watched as it struck the bunker's ventilation shaft, its designated aim point. The bomb penetrated deep into the structure before detonating, annihilating the command center from the inside out. On the radar screens across Baghdad, the center simply vanished from the network without ever having reported a threat. This pattern was repeated across the country. The Nighthawks crippled Iraq's command structure, severed its communication lines, and punched holes in its power grid, creating confusion and chaos. The massive integrated shield that Saddam Hussein had spent billions to build was rendered useless in a matter of hours, not by a brute force assault, but by a weapon that played by an entirely different set of rules. For the leadership of the Soviet PVO in Moscow, the reports from that first night were a source of profound horror and humiliation. As the data poured in, the Iraqi reports of total system blindness, confirmed by their own intelligence and satellite imagery, the truth became undeniable. The ghost they had been chasing, the Nevidimka, was real. And it was more effective than their worst fears had imagined. Their entire worldview, built on the solid foundations of radar physics, layered defense, and the mathematical certainty of detection, had been rendered obsolete overnight. They had spent decades perfecting a shield designed to stop a massive NATO bombing raid, assuming that any attacker would have to fight their way through a wall of electronic noise and defensive fire. They had prepared for a loud, chaotic battle. Instead, the enemy had simply walked through the wall as if it wasn't there. The shield had not been breached, it had been bypassed. This was a fundamentally different and more terrifying kind of failure. It wasn't about a better missile or a more powerful radar jammer. It was about a conceptual breakthrough that made their entire system irrelevant. The Americans had not built a bigger hammer. They had created a weapon that operated in a different dimension of warfare, a dimension where the PVO's decades of investment and expertise meant nothing. The silence from Baghdad's radar screens was the sound of an entire military doctrine collapsing. The world had changed in a single night, and the Soviet Union had woken up to find itself on the wrong side of history. As the weeks of Operation Desert Storm unfolded, the overwhelming success of the F-117 became a symbol of a much deeper, more strategic collapse. For the Soviet Union, watching from the sidelines as its own military technology was systematically dismantled, the shock was far greater than a simple battlefield defeat. The Nighthawk was not just a superior aircraft, it was a manifestation of a different way of thinking, a different model of innovation that exposed the fatal flaws at the heart of the Soviet system. The Soviet military-industrial complex was a behemoth of heavy industry, a testament to the power of mass production and imitation. It excelled at building vast quantities of robust, reliable hardware, thousands of tanks, forests of missiles, and acres of radar dishes. Its approach to technological competition was often to copy and improve upon Western designs, creating a formidable, if less sophisticated, mirror image of NATO's arsenal. But the F-117 was a weapon that could not be copied. It was not a piece of hardware in the traditional sense. It was the product of a convergence of disparate, cutting-edge fields. It was born from a marriage of theoretical physics, advanced materials science, and, most critically, revolutionary software engineering. The genius of the project was not in any single component, but in the seamless integration of all of them. It required a system that could foster radical, out-of-the-box thinking, empower a secretive and agile engineering team like the Skunk Works, and invest billions of dollars for over a decade in a project that showed no immediate results and whose very existence was a closely guarded secret. This was a model of innovation that the rigid, top-down Soviet system could not replicate. Its bureaucracy stifled creativity, its focus on quantity over quality discouraged radical experimentation, and its technological base was falling critically behind in the crucial field of microprocessors and software. While the USSR was still perfecting the vacuum tube, the United States was building flying computers. The F-117's fly-by-wire system, which made the impossible shape aerodynamically viable, was a triumph of software, an area where the Soviet Union had a profound and irreversible disadvantage. The revelation of the Nighthawk sent a shockwave through the highest levels of the Soviet government and military. It was a moment of terrifying clarity. It demonstrated that the Cold War would not be won by the nation with the most tanks or the biggest bombs, but by the one that could innovate faster and more creatively. The technological gap, which they had long suspected, was now revealed to be a chasm. They had no counter to stealth and no clear path to developing it. Their entire air defense doctrine, a source of national pride and strategic security, was obsolete. The psychological impact was devastating. It compounded the sense of decay and stagnation that already plagued the Soviet Union in its final years. The crumbling economy, the political upheaval, and the failing war in Afghanistan were now joined by a stark military vulnerability. The shield was broken, and the ideological certainty that had sustained the Soviet state for 70 years was cracking along with it. In the end, the story of the F-117 and the failure of the Baghdad shield is a parable about two competing philosophies. The Soviet Union had built a massive, impenetrable wall. It was a defense born of a worldview that saw conflict as a head-on collision of industrial might, a battle of attrition. The United States, through the Skunk Works, had taken a different path. It had not wasted its resources trying to build a better battering ram to break through the wall. Instead, it had focused on an idea. It had found a mathematical key, turned it into a flying computer, and created a weapon that could simply ignore the wall altogether. The Cold War was ultimately a war of ideas, not just in the political and economic sense, but in the technological one as well. The F-117 Nighthawk was more than just a remarkable aircraft. It was a flying embodiment of the innovative spirit that could flourish in an open, competitive system. Its triumph over the Soviet-designed defenses in Iraq was a quiet, almost bloodless demonstration of which system was better equipped for the future. On that January night in 1991, the bombs that fell on Baghdad did more than cripple an army. They exposed the fatal weakness of a superpower and signaled the end of an era.